Welcome to Corporate Baggage, where we will help you unpack, repack, and lighten the load. We're your hosts, Whitney Siders and Catie Campbell.
For nearly 40 years, we've been coaches, consultants, and leaders inside organizations and supporting global enterprises and Fortune 500 companies to help make those organizations strong and healthy.
If there's a hot topic in the workplace, you better believe we'll be unpacking it here. Topics like return to office, performance reviews, compensation. Nothing is off limits. Like, subscribe, follow us, and drop your baggage in the comments so we can unpack it together and lighten the load.
The only thing that should be in your bag is your paycheck. Whitney.
Catie.
Welcome back to Corporate Baggage, where we help you unpack, repack, and hopefully lighten your load. And today I am super excited. We are sort of capping off a series of conversations we've had around work-life balance, and we've totally unpacked what that looks like and maybe why we love and hate that term, but really the complexity around the entire concept. But I was so excited to talk about this particular topic today because I think you've hit on something really genius that really super connects to work-life balance and the experience that both companies and employees are having right now about how people work and how they're conceptualizing work and how really employees are trying to help themselves find balance in how they make money, how they learn, how they contribute through things like work. So I think to really dig into it, we need to take a step back. So previously we've talked about hustle culture, right? And that was really the concept of, born out of Silicon Valley, you just need to work all the time, always be doing blood, sweat, and tears, 20 hours a day plus, sleeping on a futon, with 20 other people in a house. Like it's crazy to be able to advance and get ahead, right? To eventually make the money or have the success that you desire. And hustle culture has permeated for the last 10 to 15 years, almost all elements of for-profit, nonprofit, and really even government organizations. Before hustle culture was a thing, it was conceivable that some people, in order to make ends meet, would work 2 jobs or 3 jobs or have multiple kinds of jobs in order to find success for their family. And success might mean we're able to buy our first home, or success might mean we can buy a car or a second car. It could mean I could put my kid through college. There's all sorts of reasons why people did that. And sometimes it was just to be able to get themselves into a new socioeconomic status. So we have had that concept and that term for a very long time. Then we have hustle culture. And now we're living in an era where layoffs are commonplace every single day. It's what company, a lot of it is coming from tech at the moment, but it was all oil and gas. There were lots of other industries, financial services, that would lay people off and do mass hirings, mass layoffs. And so right now it's primarily focused on tech, but it actually goes out farther than that. And so every single day you'll open up the Wall Street Journal or maybe TikTok, doesn't matter, from soup to nuts, you're going to see where people are really having to get creative about employment for themselves. In addition to that, we are living in a time where one job doesn't necessarily fulfill everything that an employee needs, both in terms from intellectual stimulation to actual capacity. But in the end, it's also sometimes they're not getting paid enough. And so what we're seeing is that people are working in multiple different channels, but it's not like the whole, I had to work 3 jobs to survive. So you have landed on a really interesting concept that I'm super excited to share with our audience today.
So yes, so for the record, this is not my concept. I actually heard it back in 2017, and I think I'm just seeing the trend and the pattern come to fruition now and spotting it, which I think is important when you see something, say something, and see this pattern happening in this prediction. And I think we need to even zoom out even further just to be open to it, to look at those different evolutions of work. Right? So we talked about the hustle culture, right? But if we go all the way back to the Industrial Revolution and how that evolved work and the different influences society has had on work, I think that's just a big factor I want people to think about and be open to external and intrinsic factors that contribute to how work is coming together, how we show up at work and how that really influences it. So I was at a conference in Boston several years ago, back in 2017. And this is when most of you probably remember this, and it's still a topic now, one that I really hate the term of, but the future of work. It was all the rage, right? The future of work conference, the future of work panel. What is the future of work? Well, it was just what we're talking about now, which is trying to figure out what is that next version. And what's so funny is that was in, I would say probably like 2015 to 2018-s, right? Ish. And then the pandemic happened. So that was kind of thrown out. And then the future of work became, is it hybrid? Is it remote? And all of that we hate talking about too.
That's right.
Although we did.
And we will in the future.
And we will continue to, because it's a real thing and it's a real factor. But my point being is that at that moment, in that conversation, there was one thing that stood out to me in that presentation. This woman from MIT, very smart individual, using data that she had gathered, was showing this information on this PowerPoint slide about a job portfolio. And I had never heard someone talk about someone having multiple jobs in that way. Because as you and I have talked about, is that when someone has multiple jobs, society looks at it in a little bit of a negative connotation, right? Like, oh, you have to work 2 jobs or you have to work 3 jobs.
Or even like a freelancer.
Right.
Right. It's like,
even the gig economy wasn't even a thing, or wasn't even when it was a thing, it was kind of frowned upon of like,
right,
you don't have a real job. Right. I mean, even sometimes my grandma used to call me and be like, are you working today? Yeah, I'm just working from home. I'm still working. Like, I'm still working, but I am working from home. Yes. And it's so funny. But anyway, so this idea of a job portfolio was presented in a way. And at the time, again, back in 2017, I was like, well, that's kind of revolutionary. Like, that seems crazy. Right. And now this job portfolio is smacking me in the face, because not only am I building that for myself, but I can't tell you the amount of conversations I've had with people who have either said, I'm leaving my corporate job and starting my own thing, or I'm going part-time and I'm going to work a couple jobs because of X, Y, and Z. And a lot of times those reasons stem back to what you just said, which is it's a few factors. One, I need to economically because of the economy. 2, because of childcare or family dynamics or other things like that. Or 3, because I don't feel fulfilled in my current job. I have this passion around something else that I never really explored, or I didn't know, or it's new to me, or, you know, my child has gone through this cancer diagnosis and now I want to volunteer for this organization. These are real things that, back to what we were talking about, work-life balance, I think we need to think about what is going to fill us up. And it's no longer, I think people are really waking up to, if the pandemic gave us anything, it gave us this, is I don't have to do all of these things. Like, what are the things that are really going to make my life feel full, and how can I make that happen? At least I'm hoping that we're more on that path.
I think we are on that path, because I think the pendulum swung in some interesting ways around what the role and responsibility of a company was as it relates to their employees.
100%.
So you went back as far as the Industrial Revolution. Can we go post-war 50s, somewhere in there? It was fairly commonplace for most companies to have a pension plan.
Right.
Because the goal was to keep people at the same company, allow them to grow. It provides all sorts of efficiency and all sorts of stuff, all things that we know. And it made a lot of sense that we would look at companies as families, even though we've talked about that families are dysfunctional, so we shouldn't do that with companies. But it was, family atmosphere. A lot of companies were family run. They weren't held by PE, organizations. It was like Joe Smith's company, and everybody knew that, and that's who you worked for. And they did things to take care of people. They paid people fair wages for the most part. And they did things to make it so that people didn't have a good reason to leave. Like, why would you want to go anywhere else? You can be who you want to be here. Then when you add in things that are, I would say, topics that came up when you and I entered the professional workforce, was around engagement And it was really pushing leaders and companies to focus in on how do you make this a great environment? How do you make this a great culture? How do you allow people to bring their whole selves to work? These are all things that you and I have bought into and helped driven in organizations. And at the same time, it's inconceivable that any organization can be the end all be all to any employee, even if you are the business owner. Even if you're the business owner,
Right.
like it's not the end all be all. You still have to have other things in your life, and most people do outside of what they would say traditional work, that kind of fill in your personal fulfillment or happiness or those sorts of things. And so we swung in our generation of coming into the workforce and thinking about culture, we swung it so far that way of like, that is the ultimate thing that you should be building. And we never worked with or for a company that was able to ultimately build that utopia. But we help companies get a lot closer to that, to make it a really great, engaging place to work that also provided great customer service or products to their customers or shareholders, profits to shareholders, or also just the nonprofits that we worked for. Great service. Okay. So now I think people are waking up and saying, if I'm going to just get caught up in this next round of layoffs, or if that is the thing that's happening now, it's not the future of work, it's the reality of work, then maybe I shouldn't be looking to this for fulfillment. I need to be looking for fulfillment other places. And that's both professional growth, but intellectual and then personal growth too. So I think in a good way that we're kind of right-sizing this back here to say we shouldn't look for the companies to fulfill that, but what you're suggesting and what this research is suggesting in the portfolio concept is that you're going to have to go and find it in a couple different places and make that your concept around work. Is that fairly accurate?
Very accurate. And I think it does hit on fulfilling the desires, the needs, the wants that the individual has. But you also mentioned kind of spreading the risk, just like a financial portfolio. Mm-hmm. So instead of putting all my eggs in one corporate basket and saying my full-time job is the only thing I have, we've learned nothing is foolproof. Nothing is reliable. Even back in the day, a lot of people chose, we talked about startups a lot. A lot of people would choose startups knowing that there was instability, but they wanted that culture. On the flip side, people chose the corporate life because they wanted that stability.
Right.
And now corporate life isn't even stable.
No.
Nothing is stable.
It never really was before.
Never really was.
Be honest?
It never was, but the allure,
yes,
that it was stable, and that was a selling point.
Oh, totally.
That was a talent attraction point. And nothing is stable. And so once you get that clear in your mind, is that nothing is actually stable or guaranteed. So I can either choose to take that risk and have one job, which is fair and commonplace. So
right,
that's fine. And I might have some other passions that I want to explore, or I might want to volunteer, or I might want to explore some other opportunities that could lead me to my next thing. What does that look like? Mm-hmm. So I think we're 100% seeing that more because of many other factors I just talked about, the economy, the passions, all those things. So we have to look at it from two lenses, the employee and the business. Because employees might say, oh, I want to do that, but how is that even going to look? Is that even accepted at all?
Well, yeah. So from the business side, and we're going to have to go back and forth on this one for sure. And I'm happy to take the business side on this one, just because you and I have spent time working with these CEOs, heads of companies that really want that employee commitment. In fact, almost every single survey that we've ever done around culture asks those questions around like your commitment, like what would make you leave, what keeps you here. That is all speaking to specifics around commitment. So there's the commitment piece of it. We're seeing this change almost in real time, but like there's employment agreements that restrict people from doing sometimes anything outside of their normal 9 to 5 or their traditional job. If you were
job non-compete, after job non-compete,
all of it, or even just like I have a friend of mine who was needing to make some extra money. And they said, okay, well, I'm just going to work my 9 to 5, which is a very corporate job. And then like go be a barista on the weekends or go work fast food on the weekends or whatever. It was something that they could just like felt like they could just slot into and just do. And it really was just to generate some additional revenue for their family. And their company, they went and looked at their employment agreement and said, you can't do any other job to make money. You can't be compensated in any way except outside of here. It's crazy, but it still exists. There are people who are operating right now in lots of companies who probably signed that.
I don't even know.
Yeah. Big doe-eyed on day one onboarding, and they have no idea that that's what they're held up against. We also are seeing, because you've seen this too, that once the pandemic started and people were working fully remote, they also realized that, gosh, I could get my work done in more time. Like I could get paid for 8 hours and get my work done in 4, and I could go get a different remote job and get paid for 8 hours. And so they're double dipping basically and saying that they're full-time employed at 2 different companies. And that caused consternations because there weren't policies and things that were protecting the company around that. Right. So that's one example. There's many others, but it's a challenge for businesses because I don't think they hire people and say, we're just going to grind them into a pulp. We don't really care what happens to them. But they do have a set of expectations about what they want to see from people. And they have an idea that if I'm hiring you to do a job, I'm going to pay you a salary to do the job. You're focused on me, especially if you're a W-2 employee. I don't think that's the case anymore.
No, I agree with you. I don't think it's the case. And I think that we saw this during the pandemic is the employees will drive some of these decisions, and it's going to be this power struggle a little bit until there will be certain companies, and we see this all the time, right? Of early adopters of some of these trends, right? There will be some companies that are a little bit more progressive in a way of trying to figure it out. And I think that will attract certain talent. Mm-hmm. So it is up to you, if you're listening to this as a business owner, as an executive leader in a business, is what do we want that to look like, and what type of talent do we want to attract? So if we want the fully committed person, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does that require? What does that limit that person in doing? And that could still get you exactly what you want. Or we want to create this more progressive environment that allows for those things. There does need to be policies in place. This isn't a wild, wild west where you can do whatever you want. It is, though, however, a supportive environment that says, okay, it goes back to the human-centered leadership, which is talk to me about what does matter to you and how can we make that possible. And what it isn't, though, I kind of try and stay away from this, is it's not custom per person, because that doesn't allow you to have policies that support the legal aspect of the company too, because we do need to protect the company entity as well. So there are these counterbalances, but I think what we're trying to get at here and open the conversation around is what we're seeing, which is more people than ever. I think McKinsey just came out with a study this week around more people than ever, particularly women, are leaving their corporate 9-to-5 jobs.
Right.
Than ever before. And so it's not the great resignation. It's people are leaving, and what you would normally, when I just said that, did you think they're leaving to stay at home? No, they're leaving to start their own business. They're leaving to go somewhere else. But why? It's because those systems don't support them in a way that society needs or wants anymore.
And I think there is a healthy balance that could be struck at this time between businesses and employees around this topic. But it's going to mean recontextualizing words, and especially on the business side, to really internalize what they mean to them. So I'm thinking about things like commitment, loyalty, consistency. So it's hard for me, and I know it's going to be hard for a lot of business owners to say, well, how am I going to get consistent output from Whitney to produce things that are valuable to me or my customers if she's also working like 1 or 2 other jobs over here? Well, freelance people do it all the time. They've been doing it for a very long time. They're really great at it. It's a skill. You have to learn how to do that. But that doesn't mean that Whitney's not loyal or committed to what she's doing when she's working for our company or with me. And so I think there's going to have to be, and I don't believe any of this stuff. Like I believe that people should get to have a portfolio career if they want, or go and work in one place and crush it and do it there. But like, find the balance that's right for you and fulfill it. But like, for businesses, I think they're going to have to really shift their mindset on what do we mean by loyalty? And what it might mean is when Whitney's working on the clock for us or she's doing something for us, she's all in on that. But we don't expect that she's all in on our company and nobody else or nothing else when she's not here. I do think it's also, instead of having the policies around you can't go and moonlight somewhere or you can't go and work somewhere else, I think those are the things of the past, but you do raise something that's important. And any of the lawyers that are on here, especially corporate ones, are like, yes, thank you, Whitney. Talking about risk, that it is a risk if you are doing work for company A and then you do some work for company B and either they're competitors or near competitors. How do we make sure that you're able to keep up kind of the guardrails there so that we're not sharing company secrets, we're not giving away proprietary information, there's risk around the devices that we use. So I'm hoping all the lawyers are like, there's new cool things for us to figure out, but this is the next wave of what follows. More and more people opting into exactly what you were talking about.
We're on the early end of it, and we're just starting to see the signals of it. And just like when there was the hybrid conversation, there are some companies that nailed it and some that didn't. And I think this is going to be exactly like that in the way that is, we're seeing the early signs of it. People are voting with their feet and doing what they need to do. And some companies will rise to that occasion and some won't. And there will be trade-offs. And some companies will be totally fine because they will always attract the 9 to 5, right? Because of who they are or who they stand for or what that brand represents. And there will be other companies that really struggle with it because they just attract those types of employees, right? That need or want or desire that different type of working relationship.
It's also, there's so many people that we know and have worked with, and I think we could probably include ourselves in this category too, that have a wide range of capabilities and skills that could be applied in a whole bunch of different contexts. So you and I have historically worked with a lot of medium-sized businesses, some much larger businesses, Fortune 500 companies. And so we have domain expertise in working in scale which is so much harder to do sometimes, or it's just more complex than when you're looking at a small business. But we've also done some really cool work for smaller nonprofits, medium-sized nonprofits, small businesses, and legit 1 and 2 person startups, right? So we have, in the cool way, have run the gamut from the full spectrum of supporting leaders, business owners in their work. And it is a different skill set to work with entrepreneurs than it is sometimes working at the top of the house at a Fortune 500 company. What's needed, what we have to bring to the table would be very different. But we're going to keep doing that. And I want the opportunity to do that. And we used to work at an organization where those two sides of the business were sort of segmented. One group did the smaller sized companies and the other group did the larger size enterprise clients. And what I think we found was we kind of like doing a little bit of both. We kind of like dipping into it because it's a different challenge. It's more interesting. The problems were slightly different. So it challenged us, but it allows us to flex new skills. Now, we were doing that all within one company, but I think there's a lot of people who have different skill sets. They would like to apply things in vastly different ways. And you're not going to be able to do it all in one company. We lucked out in being able to do that, but most people, that's not going to be their reality. Right.
Yeah, and one thing we haven't talked about are the other realities of things like benefits and support. So we've talked in earlier episodes about family dynamics. So, if you don't have benefits through your partner, you have the choice to either go to an employer that has benefits or purchase it on your own, which is a whole different scenario.
So fun.
Right, super fun. So there are certain realities at play that employers fulfill needs of that are true realities. So the way back to the story of how this came to be for me in my brain in 2017 was this presenter was talking about this job portfolio in a way that her prediction was that a single person or an individual, not a single person, they could be, have a partner, has a primary job. And your primary job has your benefits, maybe your 401k, maybe whatever it is, but some benefits package, right? Healthcare. And then you have one or two or even three other jobs that look however they look, right? So the idea was that there was a primary, secondary, whatever.
Okay.
That could be the case. Now, I think that has even since evolved, at least to what I'm seeing now, which is figuring out different ways to do that. So for me, and I know for you, we have foregone that scenario where we don't have those benefits.
Yeah.
In a primary job because we're business owner, right? We're our own business owner. And I think that is going to become more of a commonplace to figure out and tough in America to do, but to figure out, again, like we said many times, what's possible.
So this is going to become, I think, for the employees, it's going to be their baggage is going to be to figure out how do I knit together the work kind of life that I want. And part of that, as you say, really does include the benefits and the kinds of things that would attract somebody to a company. They're no longer we know they were never the thing that kept people there. Sometimes people they feel beholden to it because they are in an extreme situation. Like they stay because the medical benefits are so great and they've got somebody who's a very ill family member. Got it. It makes sense. But for the majority of people, they don't stay just because that thing is offered. Yeah. And the more people that are transitioning out of corporate America and into non-traditional, and really being a solopreneur or being a small business owner, it's not a non-traditional thing. It's just the beginning part of becoming a corporation. So they will figure that out. And there's lots of other systems and structures, especially insurance, financial services that are like, oh, we can meet those needs. We can figure that out. The federal government said, no, we can come up with a healthcare plan. Love it or hate it, there are options for people that you don't have to opt into what a company gives you. The other piece of this is businesses. So that's going to be anybody who says, I want to have this kind of portfolio work lifestyle is going to have to figure that out. On the flip side of it, the businesses are going to have to figure out, so what does it mean if we only have 30% of our workforce, and it used to be 100%, only 30% of our workforce are buying into our medical benefits. On one hand, it's less expensive for you. On the other hand, you don't always get the economies of scale when you're losing 2/3 of your workforce because they're doing the portfolio work. So I think what we can also see is there will continue to be a balancing and rebalancing on both the employee and the business side of what does this really look like? Like there's a cause and effect to people being all in one place or being segmented across a couple of different places. And I think we're going to see, if I had to predict, we'll just put this out there now, I think we're going to see more people who are picking 2 and 3 jobs and there isn't a primary job. It's just more like,
I agree.
I'm doing this amount of work here and this amount of work here and this amount of work here.
And I support my benefits.
Correct.
Well, because I also think that the way we think about saving and retirement is changing. I'm seeing that a lot in the younger generations, which is planning for, I don't want to wait until I'm 65 to retire. I want to retire at 40. What does that mean? And trying to figure that out. And so that is, I think, informing a lot of the job portfolios where you might have a social media job, you might run an Airbnb, you might be a tour guide, right? Like those different things are trying to create this revenue. It's different revenue streams. Like people are operating the job portfolio to me is just another way of thinking as yourself as the business. It's back to what we were thinking about as running your household as a business. So if I want this lifestyle, then what does it require me to create in terms of revenue? And that could be one stream of revenue or multiple streams of revenue. And so I'm no financial expert, so just for the record there, but I think that is changing how people think about, well, maybe that 401k isn't as important to me because I have this other revenue stream that is replacing that.
So we have grown up in the professional world where they're telling you to have a diversified portfolio, right? Sure. You got to have a 401k and you should probably have some stocks and CDs and all the kinds of things. And I'm also not a financial expert. Shout out to Jeff, who is my financial advisor. Love you. Keep the money flowing. I don't do that either, but I do think that concept is now translating into exactly what we're talking about. If you put your eggs all in one basket and you're working for one organization, you're putting a lot of your finances at risk, because when they say we're doing a layoff or a reduction in force or we are eliminating roles, now you have to start from scratch, as opposed to if it's diversified, you're going to cut out part of your income, but not all of it. And so this is a way to be able to protect yourself. The other thing that just dawned on me as I was listening to you was there's a groundswell of jobs, kinds of work that exist now that weren't even a figment of someone's imagination when you and I entered the workforce. I keep the thing that comes to top of mind is like an Instagram or a social media influencer.
Right.
Like if you had said that back when you and I first got into MySpace, well, you probably never did that. I didn't either. Facebook. Did you do MySpace?
I did.
Okay.
I'm not that young. Come on, Catie.
Okay. Either way, I never did it.
Thank you.
Okay. You're very hip and cool. Let's just cap it at that. But when you joined those platforms, did you ever think somebody could get on there and just share their life and make money off of it? No,
Absolutely not.
No, absolutely not. But now that is I just reviewed a company in diligence for an angel network that I help run. And that was one of the questions that our diligence team asked was, how are they using social influence to, not influencers necessarily, but social influence to drive product sales? Because it's a consumer packaged goods
social
company.
Selling is an industry.
And it was not an industry at all. So a long way of saying there's an opportunity, I think, to rethink all of this, simply because when a lot of these infrastructures were created, it was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And now we are in an era where the world of work works so much more quickly than it used to. And the policies and procedures and the infrastructure that these corporations started with are really hard to unwind. And so it's going to be a struggle to say, how do we change it overnight? Because for anybody who's taking on this portfolio mindset and way of working, it's changed. They're changing it basically every week.
Yeah.
We're week to week, month to month, year over year does not look the same. But for a lot of these companies, it absolutely does look the same.
Yeah. And the company ownership then has the decision. We always talk about choice here, which is the decision is I can either rebalance is a great word. I can either rebalance, adapt, and figure out how to meet this new way of working, or keep doing what I'm doing here as having full-time employees, just knowing that I'm going to limit my talent pool. So you might be foregoing really strong talent, but getting what you need out of full-time employees, and that might work best for your business.
Yep.
Or adapting and widening that talent pool in a way that, well, maybe widening, maybe not. Maybe you're limiting it too because you only are going after the people that are having job portfolios.
Right.
So again, it's always going to be that trade-off and the rebalancing. But I think the point here is seeing this trend, exposing it, talking about it is one factor. And then two, just being open to how work is changing, how it's evolving, how it's morphing over time, and talking about it.
I want to hear what you think the short, maybe longer term impact is going to be on the employee side. On the business side, I'm excited, selfishly, to have this kind of conversation around talent and strategy hit the overall strategic plan and process around that for companies. You and I have worked for years helping companies develop their corporate strategies. And we are always the people in the corner saying, but what about
The people.
the people? What about the culture? What about the people who are actually making you money? Like, you can talk about the thing that you're going to build out here, but what about the human beings that are the ones that are building that? And so now I do think the pendulum in a healthy way will swing to how do we reconceptualize the people part of our strategy to make the other things that we want to build, deliver products, services, goods, actually a reality, given the way that the world is working, versus we're going to force people into this box. So I'm excited to see that maybe talent really will become a critical part of a strategy. The smart companies are already doing that, but the laggards really need to be paying attention to, if they don't get ahead of this and start retooling their infrastructure, they will be the ones that lose. And it's going to be a very hard climb back if they ever get that opportunity.
Yeah, and like you said, people for smart companies, the good news is we have HR at the executive table more than before. It still has a way to go for a lot of companies, but at least we're seeing heads of HR, CHROs at the strategy table more than ever before, finally, right? So that is a good step in the right direction. But you asked me about employees and the short and long-term effect on it. I think for employees, there's going to be this need to, this is not a plug for us, but I think there's going to be a need for more coaching.
Oh, for sure.
To understand, what does that really look like for me? I want to do this, but I don't really know what it would look like. This is new terrain for a lot of people. And again, we say this all the time, we're all just figuring it out, but the people who have gone before can help those others. And
Absolutely.
so the coaching is figuring out, what does that really look like for me, talking that out, having that conversation, having that guidance and strategic counsel. So I think there's going to be more of a need for that. I also think for employees, there's going to be a need to assess their personal lives and figure out, what does that look like for my family dynamic? And I think we're going to see a lot of people make different choices, and that's going to change how society looks. So we've talked a lot about family dynamic. I think that is going to change, and there's going to be conversations brought up in families that have never been talked about before, because people are taking more ownership of their lives than ever before, especially women. And I think that will change not only family dynamics, how we work, but it's going to change how society works and operates.
And ultimately, this should lead to the next level version of what work-life balance actually is.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think that will inform and reform work-life balance in a way.
Awesome.
The time to zip up the bag. Is it in the bag?
I think it's in the bag. Let's zip it up.
We'll zip it up for today. More to come on the job portfolio. We'd love to hear what you're hearing and seeing in the workplace, as always, but particularly around this topic. Share it with us, but we'll zip it up.
Zip it up.
Thanks for listening. If you have some corporate baggage you want to unpack or something you took away from the conversation, drop it in the comments.
Find our social links in the description. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share these episodes.